Hello and good evening. Welcome to another Sunday art stream with myself, Pharaoh, and my two co-hosts, Alexander Adams and Panama Hat. How are we doing today, gentlemen?
Diversity is our strength, comrades.
I love the nation of Israel.
Wonderful. Have you been? Anything interesting going on?
Well, odds and ends. I've been busy doing lots of drawings. So if you hear little taps in the background, this will be me doing. I'm stippling some drawings. So that will be me actually making art live on the stream, but you won't be able to see anything. So
I'm surprised you haven't done that. I saw on Twitch that they have like various terrible digital artists streaming live. I guess you're not a woman in her 20s, so it's going to be a little bit harder. But have you ever considered doing like a live stream artwork?
Well, first of all, I think it's a little bit presumptuous of you to guess my sex and my age, because I'm not sure that you are. I think you are not clear that I do not identify as a woman and that I do not identify as someone in their 20s. So
this is a progressive channel, Pharaoh. I hope you've realised that by now.
Yes. No, but I know that these things are popular. I do sometimes watch someone called Ethan Van Sciver, who's a comic book artist, who's probably the best comic book artist at the moment. And he does drawing streams, and I like drawing alongside him, although I'm doing my own stuff. So I quite like having it on in the background when I'm doing stuff. I also listen to audiobooks, which is quite fun.
Okay, very good.
I do wonder though, Alexander Adams, if you could have like a sort of an overhanging webcam that just like films your desk and nothing else, and just we can just see you doing art. That would be good.
I think I'd probably get into trouble if I did that. I'd leave it on at the wrong moment. I think it's probably best left on. No. You might see me doing my new exercise regime. So that's what I was talking about.
I'm just imagining these kind of gross Punch-esque caricatures of the different people that stream with us that Alexander mocks.
I also think of you as having this enormous, like slanted, like desk. One of those ones that architects use that sort of like that slopes towards the floor and is like an enormous board with enormous sheets of paper.
I used to use those at art school. I haven't used those recently. I did one. There was one. I did a residency at a place called the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation, and they had original. And Joseph Albers was a famous Bauhaus modernist, and he was a leading abstract artist. And he'd actually built some of his own furniture, and he had built this drawing desk, and it was. And I have to say, it was not a very good drawing desk at all. Yeah. And I used it, and it was most uncomfortable, and it didn't tilt properly, and it was just not very well designed. So it wasn't a tribute to Bauhaus design, sadly.
Right.
Just as an aside on this, one interesting thing I found, I was doing a tempera painting course, and because the size of the icons that you typically paint are quite small, rather than using like a full easel, often people would use like a large bean bag, which amused me greatly to think a lot of kind of great orthodox artworks are probably created using like a hacky, like leaning on a hacky sack or something similar.
That's great though.
Yeah.
But to answer the actual the question, I've been all right. I've had a murderously busy week because that old thing about you wait like an hour for a bus and then three show up at once.
Of course.
Well, I had a renewal of a load of commissions to write articles for various magazines, and then three came in on the same day, all angling for the same deadline. So I was busy scribbling away at those, and then on top of doing all the regular work I do for a book, which is coming out soon. Not soon, sorry. It'll be like probably about this time next year. I then also decided, ill-advisedly, to completely disassemble and clean and polish my entire kit of horse tack, which is like I think it's over 107-ish individual pieces of brass and leather that need to be polished and cleaned off and kept free of mud and gunk and all sorts of things. It's all extremely important, but it's the most grueling work, and it took me almost 2 full days. and I never want to look at a tin of Barrasso again. I'm so finished with it. But yes, and then I came back and I put together these images. But apart from that, so I'm quite tired, but I've been fine.
Wonderful. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about politics and fashion, and I guess this original idea came from Mr. Hatt. You had the concept of left wing versus right wing in terms of fashion, but the ideas evolved beyond that. Do you want to just take us through your initial thoughts for this, and then we can get cracking looking at some artistic images?
Well, yes, as you say, the idea was to do like left wing versus right wing clothes, basically, and personal styles. But then as I was putting these images together, I basically realized the fact that traditional kind of revolutionaries or leftists actually tend not to mark themselves out with a particular style. So, for example, the best way to summarize this is that the Bolsheviks had a very clear aesthetic and a very clear way of styling themselves. Lenin didn't. He just wore a suit, you know. So when you bring it down to the personal, it's a bit more hard to define. But what I've done is I've gone all the way back to Cromwell and the soldiers of the new model army and the Cavaliers. And then I've taken it as far up as Yukio Mishima, basically.
It's kind of been like more like based fashion in time, hasn't it? Really, I guess.
Kind of, because, and of course, there like people will surely say, "Well, how come you haven't included this person and this person?" You know, like for example, I was thinking of including the Duke of Wellington, but at the end of the day, all we can say about the pictures we have of him is that, well, he's wearing a military uniform because he was commander of the army. You know, like there's, it's so you can only take it so far. And I was going to do a comparison of say him and Napoleon, and Napoleon certainly did have some very interesting personal ways of dressing, but it's not really things I could fill a stream with. Perhaps it would be something that would be, you know, better explained in a small article or something. You know, it's just not. It would be kind of hard to talk about at length, really.
But by the way, Ferro, I think you might have to explain the thumping and rattling in your background.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm currently
that's the hostages.
I'm in the utility room, so the washing machine. It's got 8 minutes left. I do apologise and I will mute myself in between. So apologies. Before we get into the images, one question I wanted to ask: whenever I talk about fashion with people, a lot of people poo-poo it. They say it's not important. It's, you know, the clothes we wear, they have no relation to who we are as people or our lives. How would you guys respond to that?
Okay, well, I'll nip in briefly because I'll be saying less than everyone else. Anyone who's seen me dressed, well, sorry, that makes it sound as though people have seen me undressed. Anyone who's seen my clothes in my few video appearances will know that I don't have very much to say about fashion. But one thing I did like about the event, which happened in August, was that there was this sort of rule that people would dress soberly and smartly, and I think it actually it conveyed a certain seriousness, and also sort of imparted a kind of collegiate atmosphere. And so I think that the sort of the way you present yourself, it does have a strong effect on the way people respond. Now, obviously, that's very clear, but there is the sort of I just wanted to mention something that the left does, which is the aposematism, which is where you get people with dyed green hair or facial piercings or, you know, neck tattoos and stuff, or, you know, sort of like women with shaved heads and stuff like that. And that aposematism is something that you get in nature. It's where a toad or a snake has a particularly vivid coloration which says, "Keep away, I'm poisonous." And so I think that's a very that's a very accurate warning for people if they notice people with those sorts of appearance. Yes.
Pat?
Well, I mean, I personally think that personal dress, which I think is a separate category to kind of general style, is vitally important, because it's basically the question that you answer by deciding on a style of dress is, what am I telling the world about myself? Like, what is the impression, the fundamental impression that I give to other people? Because as much as it would be nice to pretend that people don't judge on looks, the fact is pretty much everybody will judge on looks almost entirely, really, even if they don't know it. So it's interesting to me looking at sort of people we would consider to be based or traditional in that sense, and how they presented themselves to the world. And it's kind of interesting in that before the age of the photograph, of course, you had the painted portrait. And of course, that meant that perhaps we don't have an idea of what such people wore every day, but we do know how they wanted themselves to be portrayed to the world. You know, we know what kind of ideas they wanted to project to people based on the portraits they had painted of themselves. And sort of, I think that as the years go on and we sort of end up in the 20th century and times like that, where all of a sudden there are no real traditional poles to hug anymore, and you have this kind of group of people who have come to right wing or reactionary conclusions, but they don't really have anything to ape, so they kind of develop their own styles, or they choose aesthetics that may seem, if not avant-garde, then perhaps slightly unusual, or kind of not traditional, but something something new that in a way harks back to tradition, basically.
Just from that traditional angle, I just want to kind of highlight a few things. Firstly, that fashion was a way of kind of showing your place in society. So, for example, in the Great Chain of Being, you'd be able to be recognized instantly by what you wear. If you're a blacksmith, your hands are filthy, you're wearing kind of your apron, etc. While a clerk or a monk, would be instantly recognizable. So your job is what you wear, your place in society, the idea of something I've mentioned beforehand, certain colors and fabrics being reserved for certain level of people. I found out the other day that Cromwell, Henry VIII's Cromwell, was actually charged for a sumptuary law issue. He was wearing like orange, which was Wolsey's colours, for example. So again, a butcher's boy would never be allowed to wear those certain fabrics. So it shows your place in the world. But also, I think outside of those kind of traditional mindsets, it says a lot about the kind of soft power in today in society. If you look at the prevalence of blue jeans, for example, is very interesting to me, because the jeans are working class American hard wearing workwear,
farm labor wear.
Yes, exactly. But it's become something that is universal. It's part of this homogenizing globalizing force. You can go from England to Korea and you'll find people in blue jeans, for example. So it's a sign of cultural power. And don't forget, the Romans would mark the Gauls out as was it the Germans as trouser wearers, for example.
Yes, it was considered barbaric to wear trousers. To the Romans, a real man wore the I was going to call it a skirt, but it's not the term for it, is it? But the Roman
is it toga virilis, which you could only wear once you had become a man.
Yes,
as opposed to the toga that children wore.
That's a good point as well around age and puberty, etc. There's always that kind of movement. We sort of have that with christening garments and nursery wear. Like with children wearing sailor outfits, etc. So there's this sign of manhood and virility as part of that, which I think is quite interesting. But enough babbling. Hopefully, that's going to set us up for this idea as to the importance of fashion. Now, Hat's pulled together a series of images, so I guess we're going to go through one by one.
Oh yes, and before we begin, I should say various mid-century Germans do not feature, but offshoots of them do, shall we say, for various reasons. Anyway, so yes, I wanted to start with this to kind of set the general scene. In 1600s England, it's the age of the Civil War. And what has happened? Well, I'm going to look at this purely from the lens of an authentic reactionary. So forget all the historical arguments over was Charles I good or bad, or the reasons for this and that. From a purely reactionary lens, what has happened is that various peers of the realm and treacherous members of the gentry have raised an army. They have beaten the forces of the king militarily, and they have forced him into a peace, and they are now scouring his supporters from the land. So what we have here is a painting called "And When Did You Last See Your Father?" Now, I believe this is quite a famous piece. I think people may have seen it before, possibly.
Yes, it's come up on the stream before, yeah.
Yes, but it basically shows the son of a prominent royalist being interrogated by various parliamentarian troops. And the point I wanted to make, basically, is that what this age signifies is the kind of melting away of the traditional military aristocracy into a kind of plebeian uniformity. The kind of, if you want, literally, the color of the realm is being pulled away into buff coats and armor plate. And you can see that here, the boy and his siblings stand out in color from the parliamentarian officers who are interrogating them. And that this is kind of this is quite accurate to history, because the royalists and the Cavaliers were famed for their adoption. Even poorer members of that side were famed for their adoption of more kind of expressive, more bright ways of clothing, whereas the parliamentarians were kind of in the Protestant sense quite dour, and they were known to favor more kind of, I suppose, more practical and far more uniform and kind of dark clothing, which kind of was the aesthetic of their faction. And there will be some historians that try to tell you that this wasn't really true, and there were differences, but don't listen to them, because you can see from the styles of the time that really there was an aesthetic for each side, and for the Cavaliers it was color, and for the parliamentarians it was buff.
Yeah, I'm gonna go in as a slight fly in the ointment here, as the contrarian position. There's some interesting things for me, and firstly, you always need to divide up the parliamentarian forces into the Puritan wing, obviously under Cromwell, which is the kind of military strength, but also really there is the kind of merchant burgher class as well. The Puritans themselves, when you see they're mainly based in East Anglia, they're kind of like more like, so I don't want to be horrible to my brethren, but more like yokels, lower middle class often, or obviously Cromwell was technically part of the aristocracy as well, but so that faction certainly had a very, very pure form of fashion. I would say, interestingly, the parliamentarians, it was definitely totally lacking in colour, but they did have there was a lot of expense to their clothes, and I think you hit the point correctly where that they wore the uniform of the Protestants of the time, and when thinking about this age, you need to understand the influence of the Dutch on fashion. Yes. And as part of the Spanish Wars, so basically the Dutch and the French fighting over Belgium, there is this huge cultural divide between Protestantism and Catholicism that had been building up. Now, if you all of this kind of beautiful blue fabric across here, or again these taffeta silks at the back. They're all being produced in Spain, in Italy, in these kind of Mediterranean super Catholic countries. So what do you do when your source of silk, all of these kind of fancy silks, goes away? Well, you have to try and create your own. Now, interestingly, do you know what the most expensive color that was to dye at that time?
That would be Tyrian purple.
Okay, apart from Tyrian purple.
Okay. Apart from that, I don't know.
it was actually black. We think of it as a very cheap colorant.
Oh, okay.
But the reason
that puts a spin on things.
Well,
yeah.
But this is why if you see all the kind of these kind of Dutch merchants, they're all wearing black because it's very expensive. The other thing to look for is in the lace. Now, again, you can see this guy here. Okay, this guy here is a Puritan, and he has got just a standard collar. But if you zoom in, you can see this guy's got a slightly more fancy collar. And the burghers and the merchants would have these kind of intricate lace collars. And if you've ever seen a woman weaving lace before, it's incredibly time-consuming. It's almost like a tapestry. Yes. Where they have like a little cushion with pins in and kind of wrap things around. And so that there is an interesting... They basically don't want to be like the Mediterranean Catholics, but they still want to show off their wealth because they're bourgeois middle class. Mm-hmm. So the burghers basically put it on their... put it into the lace and into the clothes. But you do have this kind of... this dour demeanor. I think what's also interesting for me is, again, the soldiers, who, again, they're more kind of Puritans. They are the kind of more religious fanatics, really. And because of the new model army, we've got this kind of first standardized uniform. And again, if you see the Cavalier army at this time, like everyone's wearing their own thing. There's no standardization of clothes. Maybe everyone fights under a certain color or banners, but there isn't like everyone's got the same uniform. It's a real mess.
It was a complete hodgepodge because each regiment had its own clothes technically, and then when the new model army came along, it was kind of revolutionary in that every soldier was issued a standard uniform. That was new. That was a very radical thing to do, and part of my reason for my opposition to it is that, as I say, it's the end of the warrior elites, so to speak. Everybody just melts away into a common musketeer or a pikeman, so to speak.
I'd add a couple of socioeconomic points. The first is that one of the things about lace is not only is it very expensive to make, so it's expensive to buy, it's also expensive to maintain because you have to have it washed. Anything that's white has to be washed quite a lot. So you have to have servants to do this. So this shows that you have a certain status. So also remember that East Anglia was extremely wealthy because of the wool trade. So all clothing was made from wool at this time. The sheep farms and the sheep farmers of East Anglia made East Anglia one of the wealthiest areas, and so they are the archetypal new rising merchant class usurping the aristocracy in sort of civilizational terms.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, yes. By the way, if you're interested in the figure in the middle, the boy, the painting by Gainsborough called "The Blue Boy," quite a famous painting, is visiting the National Gallery for I think like the first time in 100 years. It belongs to a library in California, and it's being loaned to the National Gallery, I think, starting next week or something. So it's on display in London very, very briefly.
I think I'll go and see it, actually. That's quite momentous.
Very cool. Okay.
So again, kind of basically the same points I made the last time round. Here's a kind of a depiction, not contemporary. This would have been probably the Victorian period, I think, of Roundheads breaking into the house of a gentleman, ostensibly because he was a royalist. Now, basically, again, what I want to contrast here is the gentleman in his particular outfit who is marked out as somebody who is not like the rest. being accosted by this army that is uniform. And I think what you have to remember is that in that mob of troops there, it's not just commoners. There may well be gentlemen. There may well be peers of the realm in that mob. But the point is, they've morphed into this one whole. They've become, if you want, an unwholesome whole, who are kind of now tearing down the institutions of the land. And what they are doing is they are challenging the principle of kingly sovereignty. They are literally turning the kingdom upside down, which is, but that was a very popular phrase at the time. The world turned upside down, because things were being completely subverted. And I think people don't quite realize just what a revolutionary time it was in England, because you had kind of, yes, the parliamentarian side was also led by the aristocracy, and there we know dukes and things leading that side, as well as there were on the royalist side. They were not quite so radical, but you also had within the parliamentarian after the parliamentarian win, and they had taken over the country, you had these movements like the levelers and the diggers, whose aim was like, it sounds odd, but they were literally kind of proto-Marxist, like 200 years before Marx. They captured an area of land and basically declared it to be a commune. There would be no landowners, there would be no authority except God. The only real difference is that it's all through a religious lens as opposed to a materialist one. So they always predicate it on God, but they literally were basically anarchists and kind of communistic types who were beginning to start their own political movements throughout the country, and they were swiftly put down by Cromwell's army, because Cromwell was not quite that radical. But yes, I mean, this is basically the point of me showing you these images, is to get across that sense of subversion, and the fact that the kind of gentlemen of the kingdom were subsumed into this all-conquering mass, which I think is essentially the theme of Western history from then onwards.
Just following on from some of that, two things. You can see these kind of like slitted sleeves across there with kind of the black and gold. And again, when you're on the battlefield, historically, you would show your colors to kind of identify who you are. So again, you're literally wearing your house and your family and your tradition on your clothes. I think, which again, we don't do that today in the same kind of way. We sort of are one of these kind of replaceable uniform crowd, if that makes sense.
Yes, exactly.
There is like these items would be handmade for the specific person, and I think there's a really interesting point here around standardization versus craft.
Yes,
and again, I think one thing that Cromwell realized very, very quickly is part of it was around the character of the men. Again, if you read Carlyle's Cromwell points, he focuses on creating soldiers with a transcendent idea. He removes the liquor, he removes the women. So there's this body thing, but there's also this
Shakespeare.
but yeah, at the same time, he goes through this process where everyone gets the same sword. And again, I like the contrast where this is one sword of 1,000 swords, all have been made the same for any man, but this sword has been made for this man by a craftsman. And it's the victory of utilitarianism versus aesthetics.
Yes.
It's the first one. We see it in the Industrial Revolution on a larger scale, but again, the first nail in the coffin, so to speak.
But militarily, actually, there's quite a lot to be said for standardization. For example, if you've got a certain bore of musket or a certain bore of cannon, then obviously you want shot that fits that. You want that standardized. But I would say also a couple of points. The slashed sleeves, you can see those in Jan Vermeer painting, the famous self-portrait, and he's got these sort of aristocratic slashed sleeves as well. And I can't remember what my other point is, so you should better move on.
Just quickly, maybe that's why that this is the moment where standardization wins, because this is this is where musket and pike becomes the major combat form. So in the past, when there was standardization of swords, it just wasn't enough. You needed the weapon.
Yes.
You needed the gun. Anyway, that's too much history discussion and not enough clothes. Let's keep on going.
So this is quite a famous Van Dyke. So before I say any more, I will ask if either of you have things to tell the audience on this, because I imagine you will.
So Van Dyke, Dutch, was it Dutch, or was born in the Low Countries, court painter of the time. Very, very highly esteemed. A lot of court painters and high status painters were foreigners in the early centuries, up until about sort of actually all the way through until about the sort of the 18th century, the late 18th century. All the best painters were foreigners because they were imported.
Just from my perspective, and relating Van Dyke to fashion, he is a man that loves fabric, and this is what I think is interesting, is that there are certain painters who could care less about what people wear. And I'll tell you like a couple who absolutely love clothes. Crivelli, the famous Venetian Renaissance master. Every single painting, he puts a lot of attention to detail into accurately displaying the beautiful fabrics in front of him. But also, Van Dyke is another one. He has a love for clothes and for clothing and for sumptuous fabrics. Take a look in the background of some of his paintings. Holbein is another one, actually, I should say. They both use expensive and luxury brocades as part of the backdrops to the paintings. Unfortunately, not in this one case, but I think he's a perfect example of someone who picks up on the fashion very well. But Panama, take us through who these people are.
So, I can't tell you their personal lives as such, but as it says in the header, it's Lord John Stuart and his brother Lord Bernard Stuart. And the significance of this piece is that these were like two archetypical royalist cavaliers. These were the popular conception of a royalist. Fine clothes. The long hair was a major part of that uniform. Royalists tended to have long hair with lots of sort of ringlets and sort of tumbling locks of hair. Roundheads, as per the name, tended to have cropped hair. They tended to sort of, if not shave, then sort of dock their hair very close to the skull, which is a kind of major aesthetic choice between the two sides. And as I said before, there really was a stark aesthetic difference between the Roundheads and the Cavaliers. And again, that's why they're called Roundheads and Cavaliers. It's because they looked so different to each other. And they adopted such different ways. And, very few of the Cavaliers were actually Catholic. But it's clear, as was kind of touched upon earlier, that their tastes were Catholic. They had a love of kind of finery, and as you can see there, I presume those are kid boots, kid skin boots.
Well, I was going to talk about the boots because, again, one of the Stuart classics is what we call today the Cuban heel, the kind of raised heel. So again, today we consider it quite feminine, but the kind of intricate luxury shoe was a very Stuart innovation. They would have these very beautiful buckles on. It's this quite wonderful and strange pattern. Again, if you look at pictures of Charles I and Charles II, they again, show their wealth on their shoes. And again, I think you've got this additional bottom sole to help with the riding stirrups. Not stirrup. What's it called? Stirrup.
Spurs.
Yeah. So you can.
Hello.
Hello.
Are we still live?
I'm still alive.
No, are we still live?
Oh, still live.
Yeah.
Well,
I think we lost Ferro.
Hey, can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Yes, you're back.
Sorry. No, I was saying, is it not anyway? So basically, they put their kind of feet inside there, so it doesn't get caught. Otherwise, you'll get caught in the heel. You can see some of the lace work again around the necks. So again, very, very expensive. And also one thing, can you see how he's revealing the inside of his cloak? So again, you know that point around how you don't want to get your nice fabrics dirty. You'd have your kind of lesser fabric on the outside, and then the kind of more expensive on the inside. And he's kind of revealing. Part of it is kind of like the hidden gem. That's like an oyster. That's part of the fashion at this time. They also will have it's kind of like an evolution from the Tudors. You know, you have the kind of big puffling pants. This is it's kind of now almost these kind of 3/4 length trousers with you'd often have like stockings underneath, men's stockings. And then you can see these kind of prototype waistcoats coming into play with the doublet.
Yes, that's right. What would eventually become the waistcoat. And of course, the thing to remember is that those heels and the cloaks and things, streets until the kind of 50s, at least in this country, were absolutely filthy by modern standards. They would be full of, even it didn't matter in the most wealthy town or the most poor town, the streets would be full of horse muck, chimney smoke, piles of refuse, coal, like all sorts of things. And so, you needed kind of cloaks and high boots and heels, literally just to keep you clean, to make sure that you weren't stepping in horse muck or getting coal smut all over you, and also that was the importance of sort of hats. That's why hats were so commonly worn, was just to keep you clean. So, that's also part of the reason for these sorts of clothing. But yes, back to the point at hand. Yes, archetypical royalist Cavaliers, the warriors of the king versus the parliamentarian mass army, the new model army.
Oh, by the way, for Ferro and all fans of Crivelli, I have good news for you. There will be an exhibition of Crivelli at, of all places, the Icon Gallery in central Birmingham, which will be running. Yes, I know. Which will be a gem in something that isn't gem-like. So that will be running from the 23rd of February until the 29th of May.
I swore off ever going back to Birmingham again after going last time. So
maybe we could tempt you there. We could visit the exhibition and then we could do a stream afterwards.
If we can find a way to kind of extract him from Essex and kind of inject him directly into the gallery, then I think we can get Ferro to attend. But other than that,
you have to like like Mr. T was anaesthetised whenever he flew. Yeah. It'll be like that. You'd have to drug me, and then I'd wake up in Birmingham, and then
as long as we didn't tell you that you were in Birmingham, you'd be fine.
Yeah,
as long as you never found out. Yes, indeed. So here we have I was going to say the coronation portrait, but it's not a coronation portrait, obviously. But the investiture portrait of one Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protector. Go on.
All I was going to say, there is no good painting of Cromwell because he obviously, all the best painters love to hang out with the royalists because they paid well. He's too much of a utilitarian to afford someone to get him a decent painting, sadly.
Painters tended to be rather conservative. But basically what I wanted the point I wanted to make by showing you this is that this is the portrait of him reflecting, this is what he wants to show to the world. And what is he? He's a military dictator. He's wearing essentially like the modern the historical equivalent of like a sort of general's uniform. He's wearing plate armor, carrying the marshal's baton, helmet under his arm in place of a crown and scepter, and that's it. There's very little else to it. There's a kind of a pillar of authority, I suppose, behind him, but that's it. This is him declaring himself, in essence, to be the military commander of Britain, which is what he was. That was where his authority did not come from God, as much as he claimed it did. It came from the army. If it wasn't for the army, then he wouldn't have been in power. And
wasn't his actual title something like Lord Protector or something?
Yes, the Lord Protector of the Commonwealth was his title. Commonwealth of England. And of course, this is the portrait that was painted during the rule of the major generals, which is a period in which Cromwell dispatched various commanders of the army to command regions of the kingdom. So, all over England, all over Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, there were these major generals of the army who commanded through nothing but brute force. There was no pretense of godly legitimacy. It was all just brute force. And that's what Cromwell puts across here. He's commander of the army. He wears armor. He carries a baton and a helmet. And that's his authority. It's the reason that the king carries a crown and the other accompaniments is because it symbolizes godly rule of the kingdom. It's trying to put across that the kingdom is in the hands of God. Here, all we know is that the kingdom is in the hands of the military, and that's what we have.
I quite like. I wonder what metal this rod's meant to be. I may try and find out whether it's bronze or brass, because again, you'd have often these kind of quite fancy rods of command, but this is just like a raw metal. The other thing to note is obviously, like you said, this is the armor of a general. But people would typically wear like dress armor, and I think in a previous stream you brought up, was it I know it was Charles I dressed up in kind of like his fancy Roman attire.
I think
attire. His parade armor here is just absolutely brutal, and also that there is actually something weirdly traditional about it, where again, this isn't the armor that he would have rode out on, probably.
No, certainly not. Armor was not really worn during actual war in this period, unless you were sort of heavy cavalry.
Yeah, okay.
You would wear armor, or you were an aristocrat who had a suit of armor passed down to you. You might wear one, but it was considered a kind of a mark of authority as opposed to a practical thing, because of course musket balls and cannon can very easily shoot through armor, so there was no real practical reason to wear it.
Pharaoh, I sent you something through DMs. You might want to get up.
Okay, I'll have to stop.
You have to close you have to close off the. Sorry about that. No, it's just because we didn't. I don't think I didn't see the list beforehand. I'm intervening by sending one image. So, so Hat is in the driving seat and I'm in the back seat, looking out of the window, making banal comments on the scenery.
No, absolutely not. This is one place where we truly are equals. In terms of art discussion, there is no. If anything, I am the plebeian when it comes to art discussion here, because I'm the one who doesn't have the professional experience.
And yet you're the natural aristocrat out of all of us, I think.
Yes, unfortunately so.
So I sent Pharaoh an image that I thought would be very appropriate because it relates to Cromwell.
Okay, I can't get this to work. I will just try my best. I'm an absolute beamer. Here we go.
So you said there were no good paintings of Cromwell. This is a Cromwell painting of Cromwell by Alexander Adams.
I was thinking it was your style as soon as I saw it, but I didn't know to say.
Thank you. Yes, so this was a painting that I did about 10 years ago, and it's in an oval format, rather peculiar. I found these oval formats are traditionally used for portraits. And I found the group of oval portrait style canvases for sale in Berlin, and so this is a painting that I made in Berlin, and this is Cromwell taken from his death mask.
Yes, I was going to say.
So this was there was a death mask cast. Obviously when he died. And that obviously it shows. Certain inconsistencies and sort of the faults, or the individuality of the man himself, and this is one of the indirect paintings that I made, which were paintings, of photographs, of casts, of life masks and death masks. So this is sort of like 3 stages removed, 4 stages removed. I wanted to do these paintings where you get these sort of so many different intervening stages. It's like, at what point does it stop becoming a portrait? At what point does it stop giving you any information about the original subject, when it's become detached by sort of 3 or 4 or 5 stages? So I thought that was worth including.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you.
What's around the edge here? Is it like some kind of glue?
Oh, that's just is because you can't fold, you can't sort of crimp the canvas around a circular frame or an oval frame. You get certain irregularities with the square one, or with any straight edges. It doesn't matter how many straight edges you got. You could have 3 straight edges. You could have 12 straight edges. You can sort of fold over cleanly. But if you've got a curving surface, then you tend to get this sort of crimping around the edge.
It kind of adds to the effect. I quite like it. It's a bit ghostly or something. But no, lovely.
No, I very much like that.
Thank you.
Yes, so basically just to contrast, he was one of the coronation portraits of King Charles. As you can see, the whole kind of outfit is brimming with lace and finery. And the point is that a lot of people would say, oh, well, this just looks, this looks silly, it looks extravagant. The point is, it reflects both the authority of the king and the tradition he represents, basically. That this outfit, the whole point is it represents a line which goes back to the most ancient times of the British Isles, is the point. The idea that the tradition of monarchy, and as you can see, there's the crown and the scepter there, which represent the authority of God. I just wanted to kind of contrast that with the Cromwell portrait. The idea that there is something more than just Charles himself here. This is not a portrait just designed to flatter the person of Charles Stuart. It's designed to put him in the frame, put him in the context of the King of England, and the kind of the ruler of the 3 kingdoms of England, Scotland, and Ireland, is the point.
Do we know what the medallion is?
I think it may be the coat of arms of the kingdom at the time, but I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
I'd have to look into it.
I quite like this. Often when you see paintings of Charles II, I think he wears too much, but I think this has got a strong, dapper look. Just a few things. I mean, firstly, the hat. This is a truly wonderful hat. He's ridiculously... It's more plume than hat. You need to get on that kind of feather level with your hat.
You should wear that to the next event, Ferro, because I like your hat. I like your hat at the event.
I am a hat wearer. I do love a hat. The other thing to note, obviously red. Now, I can tell instantly from the darkness of the red that it's been dyed using the cochineal, which is a type of insect which was imported from Latin America at the time. So it uses ground up beetle from the from the Spanish. Basically, it gives this very dark crimson red. There used to be production from Spain from the Kermes beetle, but it basically got monopolized by the Spanish.
Okay.
So we didn't have access to it. The kind of other thing to note is this is obviously a brocaded satin waistcoat doublet thing here. So you can tell it's a satin because it's got this kind of high shine. Now, do you know what makes a satin a satin?
I can't say I do.
Is it? No, I don't know.
It's actually the weave structure. So when you're weaving, you've obviously got warps, which are kind of like your vertical threads, and you've got your wefts, which are your horizontal threads. And basically you either have a lot of warp coverage or a lot of weft coverage, but there's not. It's a very loosely bound fabric, and it uses very thin lines. So when someone tells you that it's a satin, it isn't necessarily a silk. It's just the weave structure, and it gives it that very high kind of shine color.
Right.
Obviously, all of the work around the edges here would have been done by hand as well. So imagine just the hours of effort to kind of hand embroider. The same with the kind of the kind of gold belt across there, and then just again,
look at those
turquoise, yeah, exactly,
stockings.
Outrageous. Again, rare colors like this would have been very expensive. So again, like you got to remember, we're in a world where not all the colors that we see today exist. Even you got to, for example, like the Greeks didn't know the color blue, is it, or something ridiculous like that?
Yeah, so supposedly, yeah. Apparently there's an order that there's been linguistic analysis, and apparently the more sophisticated a civilization, the more the language reflects that sophistication by having specific words for colors, and the more sophisticated the civilization, the more words for colors. So that you can actually trace this. You can go to certain primitive civilizations, and they don't have words for certain colors just because they haven't developed them yet.
I thought you were going to debunk me. Then I was going to get debunked.
Yeah.
Oh no! I think that is true. Yeah.
Maybe
blue is one of the last colors to come up, because there's a series of colors that come up. So you get something like black and white, and they come up early, and then red, and then green and yellow and orange. And one of the last colors to come up, interestingly enough, is blue.
Yeah,
that's the last one that comes up in the civilizational development.
But this is obviously a very unique color. Just so again, like imagine you have to sort of like squeeze juice out of 1,000 beetles just to get a small amount of red. You just don't have access to all of these different colors, and often it would be like a trade secret how to dye in a specific way. Again, this kind of light, I don't even call it like a mocha almost, or a really brown crimson. Alex, as a painter, what color would you name this color?
Well, it's sort of, yeah. I can't think of a specific color, because this would be a sort of a cross between a grey and a brown and sort of maroon or something. Yeah.
So again, very, very, very unique. One final thing I wanted to mention was the carpet, and again, you'll often find these exotic Oriental carpets. And one interesting thing at this time period is there was no carpet manufacturing in the West, basically. So it was still a symbol, a sign of status and power to have a Turkish or Persian, I should say, carpet in your household. And if you see, for example, Vermeer, he often uses these lovely Oriental carpets. So again, that's fashion technology that hasn't arrived just yet. But let's keep on moving. Who have we got here?
So this is the infamous King Louis XVI. And again, I just wanted to get across. Pardon me one second. I think I'm going to sneeze. I've got that horrible thing where you feel like you're going to sneeze, but you aren't. There we go. Oh, pardon me.
Bless you.
Winter colds. But yes, basically, I want to contrast the authority of this, regardless of how ridiculous or not ridiculous we think Louis XVI looks. Pardon me. Personally,
are you allergic to aristocracy or something?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, I may apparently be allergic to ermine.
Well, that will be it. Damn!
Yes,
that's. I bought you that for Christmas as well. Damn, I got to now.
You see this grand ermine cloak and all the trappings of power. The point is, it represents the godly authority of the Kingdom of France, which has existed for 1,000 years in this man's lifetime. During this man's lifetime, this is the kind of the 1,000-year mark of the French monarchy. And you can see that enormous gold disc in the background behind him, to the right there, which symbolizes, all kinds of things. You can see the Roman fasces, the axe, the scales of Madame Justice, all these sorts of things. That grand blue with which which appears to have the symbols and the arms of the House of Bourbon on it. And you can see the medallion and the cravat and the great rod of authority. You know, it's all, the point is, it's all about tradition one. Well, God one, tradition two. You know, it all comes back to what the monarchy is.
Okay, I mean, that's true. But come on, who looks better? This lad here. Look at those. The classic. This is Chad energy, and I'm sorry. This is just like, he looks like a car. He looks like a sofa.
Well, you know, that's France for you. You know,
he's too plush.
There's your Tyrian purple.
Well, is it though? Because there's a lot of faux purples at the time, and I'm pretty sure they haven't recreated it because, again, the Tyrian purple's derived from the Murex snail shell, which grows off the coast of the Levant. So, but mind you, the French did have dealings with the Ottomans at the time, didn't they? So
yes.
maybe it was, and again they have these kind of Roman allusions with the fasces, etc. One thing to note, well, in fact, two things to note. Obviously, this is a velvet, so you can see that the rather than a silk. Now, a velvet has millions of tendrils which sort of poke up from the fabric, and the way that they do that is by when they're weaving, have these tiny little rods that they thread through the warps, lifting them up, and then they cut all of these little threads, and it takes about 10 times as long to weave a velvet fabric than a normal satin one, so much more expensive. And then each of these fleur-de-lis would have been hand embroidered on the top, I'm pretty sure, with cloth of gold. So that's kind of gold beaten and wrapped around a silk thread. Now, with is ermine mink? Am I right in thinking
it's the same family? Yes.
Yes, and I mean, this would have been an entire generation of mink, isn't it? Really, that each. I mean, what amazes me is how they managed to stitch them together without giving that seamless effect to a single sheet. But you got to remember that each one of these is like the dead body of a small animal.
It's like one skin.
Yeah. I think just in terms of like wealth and power, I think Louis is definitely showing he is the wealthiest by far.
Which is slightly ironic given the state of the finances of the Kingdom of France.
Well, you know what?
He's wearing the kingdom. He's wearing the finances of the kingdom.
But yes, anyway, the point of me showing you him now is to contrast what is about to come, because we all know what happened to Louis XVI and the Kingdom of France. Because here is the face of Louis XVI. Personified, the famously, what Mr. D and I consider to be the most terrible, most badly painted portrait of one Maximilien de Robespierre, and basically there's these portraits. It's one of him and one of Georges Danton, which are extremely well, not extremely, but a little technically incompetent, shall we say. They don't seem to look very accurate. So I've included some other depictions of Robespierre here as well. But this is the one everyone will know, this painting. But yes, so if you just move on to the next one, I think there's a more accurate painting of him. Yes, this is actually what he probably looked like. Because that one that we just saw, it was we don't actually know who painted it. It's anonymous because it was so controversial to paint the portrait of a man like Robespierre, because everybody knew that if you painted his portrait and then the political situation turned against you during France in this period, you were likely to find yourself on the guillotine. So that portrait was not, there's not a name given to it, but this one does. This is what he looked like. And yes, now this set of clothes he's wearing, this was painted when he was becoming prominent in politics and was near to becoming basically the terrible dictator of France. But the point is, all it is a black suit. There's nothing else. There's no indication of authority from God or from otherwise. You know, this is not like Cromwell with his indication of the military. This is just a lawyer. This is what a lawyer would have worn to court. It's just a black business suit. It's a waistcoat, a jacket, and some breeches, and that's pretty much it. And Robespierre was quite dandified as revolutionary leaders at the time went. He was actually quite known for always wearing his best suit and a cravat and a wig and makeup to all political events, regardless of circumstance. He was quite traditional in that sense. But he's just a lawyer, basically, in this picture. And this is now who's ruling France. It's a lawyer. He isn't the king. He isn't a general. He isn't anybody that can hold any kind of real claim to be the head of a nation. He's just a lawyer, with his hat and suit. And that's it. That's all this painting is. It's him as a lawyer.
Look at that face, Panama. Look at those little cheeky rosy cheeks.
Yeah.
How could someone so cute as that do anything wrong?
Yeah, I'm sure this was somebody that was favourable to getting painted this. But yes, I mean, there's nothing else I can say. It's just a man in a suit.
Just in terms of some of the fashion points, I mean, we've moved on 100 years from if we go back to the Stuarts again, but notice how basically the three-quarter lengths are kept still, so you've still got a lot of kind of socks and stocking wearing, but the top has totally changed. You've got waistcoats being heavily used. Obviously, this is the Georgian period in England. It'll be George the it would be the Regency at this point, won't it?
This would be George the. This would be George the Third. I think
the end. I don't know if it would.
I'm not sure if this was around the time of his first descent into madness. But I think. Well, I mean, to be fair, around the time of this, I think Pitt had largely taken over as the head of Britain, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't like whether or not George III was mad by this point. I think is less relevant, but it's not the Regency yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got the jacket. You've also got the introduction of the cravat. So that's one thing that's interesting. You've got, like, from a neck perspective, all of the lace is gone. Even in the
collars go.
Yeah. And then the collars come in, and then you obviously need to protect and warm the neck. And so these kind of the use of lengths of fabric wrapped around your neck to kind of warm them up. That's part scarf, part intricate area, and actually there's a huge difference in the I quite like this one to kind of show off the flamboyantness of some of these neckties. And there's loads of manuals and stuff. Obviously, you've got the kind of rise of Bo Burnham and the dandy, who are kind of Bo Brummel. He would literally create little manuals on how to kind of knot your cravat in a certain kind of way.
It would take like 6 hours to get dressed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also the kind of the prevalent use of powdered wigs as well.
Yeah. Shaved head, powdered wig.
Yeah, exactly. And I really love the academic style. I don't know if you've got any pictures, but for example, if you look at Pepys when he's kind of outside of his clothes, there's a lot of robe wearing. This is something that Dee would approve in his caftan. It's a similar vibe where a lot of academics and men of letters at this time would sort of kind of waft around with a little hat and a full robe as well. But like you said, this is the uniform of a clerk, and again going back to that idea as your clothes as your hierarchy. This is the revolution of the clerk versus the king.
Yes. And again, this is no, it's wrong. I should have remembered this man's name, but he is an artist who specializes in historical miniatures. So he makes models of historical people, and as you can see, he does them with amazing amounts of talent. I mean, like this isn't like a mass market thing. You can't like buy these. These are one-off sculpted models, and this is one of Robespierre. And again, this is the spring and summer wardrobe of a Parisian middle class person. This is what they wore, and also this is useful because it actually depicts Robespierre how he probably looked most of the time, which is with his green spectacles, which was because he had a problem with his eyes where excessive amounts of light would cause his eyes to ache. But obviously, as a lawyer and as a politician, he needed to read a lot. so he tended to have these green spectacles on. Yes, and I mean, being green-eyed, as we know, is traditionally not something you want to aspire to. But it always makes me smile that God gives people who are subversive these hallmarks. Literally green-eyed as he executes thousands.
I'll tell you what, this is your apostmatism. Beware, keep away.
Yeah. God always knows what you're up to, subversives. But yes, this actually quite nice striped coat, which would have been something to wear in the summer.
Yes, it's definitely fancy. Now, I'm pretty sure this is actually like a precursor to gingham fabric.
I think so.
But basically, they are only weaving it in one direction, basically. But yeah, very very nice. Note the shoes again. We've lost the Cuban heels at this point.
No boots.
Yeah, exactly, but you'd have buckles, but it's massively toned down. And again, it's interesting for me around the middle class is constantly trying to ape the upper class in terms of its fashionable wear, but they can never afford the expensive shoes that we've seen previously, or the expensive lace. So they're constantly having to compromise, always have this kind of like shallow reflection of the upper class. Their fashion is driven by envy and by position of power. Do you know? So again, the person who is the most. This is sort of like the time of fashion as well. So again, if you ever see it, I'm sure if you've ever seen any Jane Austen, they constantly talk about what's been worn on the continent, what's been worn by certain people, and also the idea of the metropolitan centres being the centres of fashion as well. So like you've got someone spending tons of cash in their kind of local town, and they go to London, they look ridiculous because they're sort of getting pattern books from London that don't look anything like the reality. So that there is this interesting aping of power, but the bourgeoisie sort of use fashion as a weapon to kind of show that they're the most culturally relevant, if that makes sense. There's a shift to the bourgeois metropolitan.
This is the bourgeois becoming powerful. And also one last point on that model there. The artist is George S. Stewart. And he has a website full of his works. And they're very interesting. And that's where I got this from. Yes. But so here is Jean-Paul Marat, who I wanted to contrast because unlike Robespierre, he was known for being completely disheveled, basically, in his dress. And something you'll notice is that his neck there is on show. His collar is open. And for a long time, this was considered a very scandalous thing for a man to have an open neck, especially a kind of man who was meant to be respectable. And I'm not entirely sure why, but this went on for a long time up until fairly recently. That's why, for example, you'll see the painting of Charles I there with his high lace collar, and the Puritans will have their high lace collars, and all the way up to relatively recently, obviously a man wore a high stiff collar to keep his neck covered because it was considered indecent. And I remember, in fact, there's a moment in a book by Bulgakov, which is obviously in Russia in the 1920s, which has the Soviet Union in the 1920s. Remember, this is not like some high state of respectability. He is woken in the night by a knock on the door, and he answers it, and there's a woman there, and he actually covers his lower neck with his hand because, of course, it was like this was the point that you didn't show your lower neck to a woman ever unless you were intimately involved with her. But that was why you had all these cravats and these stiff collars, because it covered that part of the neck which was considered indecent, and he covers it as if he was covering his privates, as if he was naked. And I think that it illustrates what an important thing this was in European society. This thing about the neck. Covering it up, and of course Marat here is literally being painted with his neck open. So, and of course you can see the buttons on his coat as well are not even properly aligned. He's buttoned the wrong hole to the wrong button. They're mismatched.
There may be a further explanation for the fact that he's got his throat revealed, is that he, because he was a sort of subversive journalist, he had to hide in the sewers, and he caught some terrible skin diseases, which is why he was always taking long baths, which is so why he met the end that he did. If you go to Art and Politics, I think second stream or something, you'll find the painting by David of Marat in his bath, which is where he was killed. Yes. He was killed in his bath because he had to bathe in order to alleviate his skin conditions. And the reason the reason his throat may be exposed is maybe because it was a high collar chafed his skin, and so that's why he had to expose it.
Yes,
to expose it.
And he was stabbed by Charlotte Corday, a woman who it's odd because she was actually in the beginning in favor of the revolution, but she became really quite afraid of what was happening, and so she assassinated him to prevent a further descent into madness, which unfortunately she failed to do. But weirdly enough, she's become kind of a traditional hero of the reactionary right. Because she stabbed Marat, who was one of the most terrible and kind of pro-terror members of the revolution right up to the end. He was always calling for more death, more terror, more purges.
Well, that's it, because she met him on the pretext of giving him a list of new traitors who could be sent to the guillotine, and that's what he had in his hand when he was stabbed.
Yes, quite fittingly.
I quite like this idea of again, like the covering up of skin only for one's intimates, but we always think of it from the women's perspective, don't we? Mocking the Victorians for showing a bit of ankle or whatever, but we forget actually it's the same for men as well, just in different ways. And I think men cover your necks.
Yes, wear a collar. So yes, these are just some soldiers of the French Revolutionary Army, an illustration of what they looked like. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to contrast, again, it's this kind of Cromwellian thing of the uniformity. This fact that all these members of society have been uniformed into the Revolutionary Army, which would go on to become Napoleon's army. And if you move on to the next one, I think I've got some pictures of the war in the Vendée. Yes, here we are. So that is, if I can find, his name is very long, complicated. So give me a moment, because I did have a tab open with it. One moment. I have his name here. It is Henri de la Roche-Jacquelin, I think is the pronunciation. I'll probably get it wrong. And if there's anybody that speaks French, they can correct me. But yes, Henri de la Roche-Jacquelin, who was a 21-year-old leader of the royalist insurrection in the Vendée, which was the main resistance to the French Revolution. He was a count. He was the Count de Roche-Jacquelin. And yes, as I say, he led the Vendéan army, the Vendée, which is a very rural agricultural region in the west of France, just south of Brittany, which was from the beginning opposed to the revolution, basically because unlike the rest of France, where all the aristocracy had been moved into Paris by Louis the 14th, who was the Sun King, I believe, who kind of made the French state an absolutist state where the aristocracy was supposed to have very, very little power. The Vendée was an exception to this because it remained a region of France in which the aristocracy lived side by side with the peasantry. The aristocrats remained in their estates, and they would kind of every day they would sort of rub cheek to cheek against the peasants, so to speak. They would eat with them. They would attend church with them. They would speak to them every day and kind of keep an eye on what was happening. Whereas most of the aristocracy in other parts of France had moved into Paris and had become kind of these absentee landlords who extracted more and more wealth from the peasantry, regardless of their condition, to live these expensive bourgeois kind of lives in the capital, with no regard for the peasantry. And of course, their whole point, the point of the French aristocracy, was that they're meant to look after the peasants. They're meant to make sure that the peasants are all right and that they're being cared for and governed wisely. Which is why, when the revolution happened, the Vendée was the region which said no, in which the peasants took up arms with the clergy and with the nobility and fought against the armies that the Parisian government sent into the Vendée to quell them. And there is an ongoing feud between historians as to whether the wrath that was waged against the Vendée was a genocide or not. And there are arguments that it really was, because it was brutal. The revolutionary administration absolutely savaged that region of France because of its anti-revolutionary stance. It was vicious. And so many peasants and lords died trying to defend the way of life. The way of life they had lived for nearly 1,000 years at that point, with the king, then the church, and the land. And it's a deeply sad story, and one that is basically at the heart of the reactionary sensibility. And this man, as we see here, was 21 when he led this army, and he was killed leading it, because of course ultimately it failed. It did not overturn the revolution. And in fact, the armies that the revolutionary government sent to fight them were called the Columns of Hell, because of how much destruction they forced upon this region. And a lot of these men were armed with nothing more than like sticks and pikes and hooks. They fought literally with their farm tools. These men had very little. They did not own great wealth. They did not want to take over the French state. All they wanted was to defend the way of life that they were used to, and they paid in their lives for that. And here is one of their leaders. And it's so sorry, Fred, did you want to say something?
I was just going to comment on the painting a second. Do you know who the painter was?
No, but I could find out.
Would you mind looking? Because I think
yes, Pierre Narcisse Guérin, by the looks of it. Okay. A baron who was a Parisian painter.
Okay, that's interesting. I wonder if it's a little later after the revolution.
Yes,
I mean, this feels like it's like a post-David, romantic painting, but I think it's very, very nice. You've got this kind of Apollonian figure at the center. He's injured but still fighting on. You've got you can see the kind of fence across here, and then the enemy's bayonets only mere inches from him, but he does not flinch. You've got the kind of peasants set below him, but kind of with him. So it's a really lovely composition. Yes. And this nice little bit of interest across here from the banner wearer. I mean, just in terms of the clothes, I mean, he's obviously wearing riding boots here, so it's kind of showing his dynamic position. But you've also got the kind of the sash, which is again
the white sash again. White.
Yes, yeah. Which I wonder where this comes from, but it definitely feels like Baltic.
Well, the white was the color of the Bourbons.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but just in terms of like the use of a sash, obviously you've got the need for the additional pistol, so you can keep firing in combat. But again, that's really nice. And I mean, this has to be the most luxurious arm splint known to man. There's kind of black satin silk, but it's
quite stark, isn't it? Because during the revolution there was an enormous shift in how people dressed, and that kind of powdered wig, breeches, and sort of thing style very much went out among all classes, and all of a sudden there was this great shift towards a more practical way of dressing that you could fight in. As you can see here, I mean, he's not wearing that style. He's wearing a far more contemporary style of clothing, this kind of black doublet, I suppose, he's got on over a shirt with these breeches and boots. And you'll note the Sacred Heart badge, which is pinned to his chest, which is traditionally, of course, it's the Sacred Heart is the Sacred Heart of Christ, and it's a traditional Catholic icon, and it's a symbol of traditional Catholicism. And in fact, I have a cloth patch which was made in the Vendée, which I bought some years ago. Sorry, pardon me. Yes, which I bought some years ago, which you can sort of pin to clothing. God Almighty, sorry. And yes, as you can see, the banner behind him says "Vive le Roi," long live the king, and that was their slogan. It was the church, God, and the king, and that's what they fought for. And I mean, I don't know about you, but that's what I'm fighting for. So yes, and as you can see, the kind of he's marked out as a leader, as a sort of aristocrat, but he's not. There's nothing fanciful about it. He's clearly a man involved in something practical. He's a man of war, and I think you can see there's a kind of like this is where the Regency styles came from. This is a far more kind of like this outfit would not look out of place in 1810. This is a kind of more far-reaching style that would come into fashion much later. But here you have it in the midst of the Vendée.
It's interesting. It's kind of practical, but it still does show that kind of flamboyantness. You've obviously got the kind of yellow leggings.
Vermilion, I think.
There's also a few other touches again, like the gold belt across there, and I think he's almost wearing like a turban or something underneath, which are quite lovely. This is a very strong look. Very cool.
And note the locks of hair. Note the uncropped hair.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of a recurring symbol in kind of royalist reactionary types. Is that undocked curly hair. And note the kind of note the expression on his face as well. I think is notable. Almost like sort of angelic bliss in the midst of war.
It's a bit like sort of Saint Michael.
Yes, very much so. I think.
You find the warrior angel that you find in many religious paintings.
Very cool.
Yes, this is a cohort of his. This is Jacques Cafflineau, painted by Giraudet. Is that how you pronounce it? Yes, this is where the image in the thumbnail comes from, because I was particularly struck by the belt he has across his waist, which is crammed with. He's got a rosary there. He's got Christian iconography all over him. The pistol, the sash, the waistcoat, the short jacket, the riding trousers, the great cape. I mean, again, another leader of the peasants of the Vendée. This is a man like this is not a man in any way detached from his people. He is leading an army of peasants who love him so much, love him and the monarchy and the church so much, they will die for him. They will die defending those institutions. And this is the man that leads them. I mean, just take a glimpse of this outfit. I mean, what this is the outfit of a leader. What do you make of it, chaps?
It's very handsome.
Yeah, there's some interesting things going on. You can see again. So this must be what is it? 1880, roughly.
No, 1890. No, what? No, 1790.
This was 17. Well, he died in 1793, leading the rebellion.
Yeah, so like the that kind of early Georgian period, you have that kind of much longer waistcoat and it's all being cropped higher. I mean, this is more kind of like how we see like more modern clothes. The kind of the fancy neckties have kind of gone and been replaced by this much looser one here. The jacket is much shorter, although I don't know if you noticed the jacket in the last one, it seemed quite short, but if you look at the back, exceptionally long, but it sort of sweeps around to the side, which
long
I quite
tail,
liked.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. You got the kind of fancy cuff, and then the kind of shoes, and then almost like the spats or something like that on the top. Yeah. They almost look brogued. I also love the idea of this kind of fancy coat, which you can almost imagine him as like inheriting from his father or something like that.
Yes, definitely.
This kind of like luxurious like silk coat being taken to war at the same time. But again, this is this is the archetypical romantic hero, isn't it? Really.
Yes, almost certainly. I mean, there's a reason that these kind of royalist characters featured so heavily in romantic literature from this period all the way up to the sort of all the way up to World War II. You see these constantly. It'll be some young nobleman who's been forced out of France by the revolution, and he's fought almost to the death, to maintain his tradition, but he's just lost, and now he's got to sort of wander the world and find a new place to be. And it's a constantly recurring theme in the literature from this period on up to the Second World War, as I say. And also you'll note that he's wearing trousers, which was a very novel thing for the time. Men wore breeches and socks. Even peasants. Everybody, any man did not wear trousers. But then this period, because of because of the bloodshed and because of the need for a sort of clothing that could withstand this constant warring and fighting, and the fact that any moment you could have to jump on a horse and ride off to rally troops or to flee for your life, a more practical but still kind of notable style of clothing emerged. So you could still be an aristocrat with your fine white waistcoat and your cape, but you will need a pair of trousers rather than breeches to be able to wear on your rough travels and rough journeys.
Just on that, are you on team trouser or team breeches? Like, if you could click your fingers and turn everyone to wearing breeches,
it's so difficult.
Would you do that?
It's such a difficult question because I'm one of the people who actually still has breeches that are more because I go riding. What I find is that trying to tuck trousers into riding boots is so horrible and so uncomfortable and just awkward. I literally have a pair of trousers that were cut into breeches that I just wear to go riding in. That just fit that, so I don't have to bother tucking them into the boot. So that they look like trousers with riding boots on, but they actually need socks that come up to the knee. And I also fenced for a long time. I mean sword. I wasn't like an art thief. I mean I did the sport of fencing, and in that you have to wear breeches, and I still have a couple of pairs of breeches from when I was a fencer. So see,
it's a tough call.
It's difficult because I honestly think that trousers are superior. I'm kind of the OG Celt in that regard, in that if it was me versus the Romans, I'd be there in my trousers, as a barbarian, I suppose. But I think it's a close call, but I would have to give it up for team trouser as opposed to team breech. I know that the kind of based and trad option would be to say breeches and high socks, which I do like. I do think is an excellent look on some men, but
at the next event, if you're not wearing breeches, we will judge you. Alexander, are you team breeches or trousers?
I'll go for team trouser because I'm a natural pleb, I'm afraid.
Oh dear. I'm obviously team breeches. Many a young woman has complimented my calves before, so I need to show them off.
Dandy Pharaoh. Yes. So this is included as an example, one of the few examples in this stream of women's wear. And this is a painting that I've loved for many years, and I don't have a print of it, but I'm probably going to get one because it's well, the thing is, I don't know where I'd sort of put it because it's such a visceral piece. It's a depiction of a massacre which occurred where a load of government troops and officials arrived in the Vendée to conduct a survey to begin conscription. Because part of the reason that the Vendée became such a vicious war was because the government wanted to conscript those men into the Revolutionary Army. And if you were conscripted into the Revolutionary Army, that would mean that you were required to go and attack churches kill priests, fight the nobility and the remnants of the monarchy, and otherwise just wage wars on behalf of Robespierre and co. And obviously, the peasants of the Vendée were not in any way on board with this, and so they stormed the castle where these men were staying and massacred them, and they killed the entire contingent of revolutionary troops and officials that were sent. And what you can see here is the remnants of the revolutionary forces, and so you'll notice that there's an awful lot of blood around the genital region there. And the reason is that, like in most guerrilla wars from then to the present, a favorite method of those who are trying to terrorize away the stronger power is to use mutilations in that particular region to demoralize the enemy. You'll see this in the Spanish guerrilla war against the French, in the guerrilla wars in Asia, which were waged against Western powers. You'll see this in the guerrilla wars in the Americas and in other regions of Europe too. This is a very, very common tactic in asymmetric warfare. And what you see here is a column of Vendéan, newly mobilized Vendéan troops. So they formed the army of peasants and lords and clergy. They're going off to fight against the revolutionaries, and this column is headed by a group of noble women, or at least wealthy women. And as you can see there is a commander of the army who's noted by his outfit and his badge pinned to his lapel there, the Sacred Heart badge, and they are inspecting the casualties of the massacre. They are inspecting the revolutionaries that have been killed and otherwise maimed here. And as you can see, the people at the front of the column are not especially horrified by this. They seem kind of to be quite keen to inspect the damage. I mean, remember, this is a vicious war for the survival of a way of life. These people will probably die trying to protect their ways of life, and here they are inspecting the revolutionary casualties. You can see that there's a woman there a bit further back who is perhaps troubled by this, but the rest of the army is not. They're just sort of milling around, par for the course. The army of peasants and farmers.
This guy's just walking his dog.
Yeah, I mean, this is just what a war is like, and they're just, even the women are sort of almost partaking in the glee of slaughtering and maiming your enemies, as you can see here. And as you can see, these styles, it's clear that these are well-to-do people leading an army of not well-to-do people, and yet they're willing to die together in the same trench, so to speak, in defense of a way of life. And I think that's the reason I brought this painting on, is because I wanted to get across that point, is they are united in their faith and in their resolve to see this conflict to the end, whether or not they win or lose.
We haven't talked about women's fashions too much, but and rightly so. But you can see something interesting with like the kind of large leather gloves, which are almost militaristic across here, and the cane. So it's almost like she
would certainly need them in all that muck and blood,
Well, exactly. You know how like some women, I guess, kind of dress more manly for hunts, etc. It's sort of reminiscent of this. This is kind of like your military.
Yeah, because you have in the 19th century, you have the figure of the so-called quote unquote Amazon, which would be the sort of the woman in riding gear. So she'd be with the long gloves and the tight tunic and the sort of the hat and so forth. Yeah, and the sort of small hat.
Not that small hat.
But not that small. No. So anyway, I think this is descending into woman's hour. I'm really, I'm shocked.
I'm sorry for mentioning that, but I mean, I do love the outfits of these guys. I need to find out more about their kind of headscarves that they use. I wonder whether it's just to kind of hold the hat in place or whatever.
Yeah.
These kind of ridiculously floppy hats, and again, that kind of interesting belt. But yeah.
By the way, this is a depiction, remember, of a real event. This happened. You are looking at something that actually happened here.
This must be later again. I'd say this is late Victorian painting, I'm guessing.
Yes, I think the painting itself is, but this is a real event that is being depicted. Yes, just another depiction of the army of the Vendée. So as you can see, a mix of gentlemen and peasants. Any comments, chaps?
It looks a bit sort of improvised.
Yes, which it was.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's just like the Cavaliers using, whatever. All you have to do is wear the colours, and then you can basically wear what you like. And all you have to do is wear the badge, and then you're part of the club.
That's basically it.
But you're sort of keeping. It's a way of sort of keeping hierarchy. You can instantly tell who the top chaps are by their, nicer outfits and nicer cloaks compared to the peasants, etc. So you, it's an interesting way of, not flattening that hierarchy in the same way, or meaning that a peasant can have the same authority as a aristocrat. Obviously England sort of had a hybrid approach where there was sort of more definition for the officer class, I guess.
Yes.
To try and preserve that. But it's an interesting.
And the Republican soldiers would have had their uniforms provided for them.
Yes,
So
as we saw that picture we saw earlier of the Republican troops, they were given a government-issued uniform. Yeah. Also note that sash that the gentlemen wear that we've seen generally is a denotion of authority, and in some countries, a general of an army is still issued a sash to wear around his waist to kind of show that he is a general, he is a commander. So the men you see were wearing that sash. It implies that they're in charge of something. They're commanders of some respect.
Cool.
Yes, Vendéan troops. Yes, here we have the execution of Charette, who was a Vendéan commander who led peasants and troops against the revolutionary government. And here he is about to be executed, being informed of his impending execution. You have, I presume, a priest or a confidant with him there, weeping, and you have the commander of the revolutionary troops informing him that he is about to be executed. That
would probably be his servant, then, I should imagine. His personal servant.
Possibly. It may be a priest because we can't see the collar. Yeah. It's not easy to tell. But yes.
I would suggest that the priest would obviously be slightly more stoical. And he
possibly.
Would be performing. I mean, he would be performing last rites or whatever.
Yes.
So I don't think he would be giving into emotion before the killing.
Not unless he was a close friend. No. But yes, and as you can see, look at that inhuman mass of troops that just stretches off into the distance. There, the column goes all the way back.
Very nice.
There's endless masses who are about to take down a sort of luminary aristocrat.
And the gutter across there.
Yeah.
I mean, this little scene here just reminds me of the yes meme. You're about to be executed. Yes.
Yes.
Chad, yes. Also, look at this manlet here. Look at this manlet.
Although
sizes.
It must be said, there's a fair amount of kind of stoicism and perhaps hesitation in the face of the officer who's been tasked to carry out the execution. He doesn't seem kind of triumphant.
Yeah, exactly. No. That's a good point.
Sort of executing a worthy enemy, perhaps. And yes, look. Notice how he's taken off his hat. That's a mark of respect. You remove your hat for someone. So yes, it's a deeply melancholy piece, actually. This painting.
I quite like. Can you see how I think that he's kind of put the ends of his coat together, I guess, for riding as well, which is quite cool. So it doesn't get caught.
Yes, that would be, as all the Vendéan leaders are traditionally depicted in that way, because they would have literally, between battles, hopped on horses and rode like hell to the next one to command troops there. Because the armies were closing in on them from all sides. This was a desperate war that was fought. It was vicious. It was completely vicious. And this is how it ended for many of them. They were taken out. And somebody in the chat has pointed out that there's a line between the two men. There's that gutter between them that is literally dividing them. Like it's literally two sides. and obviously the one of them is cornered, and there's nowhere else for him to go, and he's about to be shot.
Yes, this is sort of like a depiction of the geographical situation of the rebels. Yeah.
It's literally, there's a line between them.
Very nice. Do you know who the painter is? Sorry to keep asking this, Panama.
The painter is Charette. So let me find Francois de Charette. And his execution was painted by Julien Leblanc, who was a late 1800s painter by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's kind of impressionistic with some of the stuff.
I think he himself was from that region.
Okay,
so he was kind of sympathetic to the rebels.
Yeah, it's nice. It's kind of like a bit realist.
Yeah,
it's got that kind of grittiness there, but then again, that kind of I do love that dark malaise in the background.
Yeah, the mass is
kind
here
of
to finish you off.
faceless hordes. There you go. There's an interesting little figure here. They're kind of like smirking commander
officer
there in contrast, to the more noble guy here. Interesting, very cool.
I like his
little.
Go on.
You're just finding these little artistic gems that I've never seen before. So
I haven't seen these paintings.
This is Panama Hat's reactionary tour of art. This is what this is. And you'll note, of course, that he's wearing an off-color kind of duck egg blue coat, in stark contrast to the navy and black of everybody else. Marks him out. Yeah. This is just a depiction of a Vendean, an average sort of Vendean trooper. This is just a peasant farmer. He's got a shirt, probably one waistcoat, and some breeches and boots. And he doesn't have a musket. He's just got a billhook, which he would use to scythe wheat. And that was the main weapon of the Vendean troops. And I have to say, this was not like something that was snuffed out quickly. This was a long and drawn-out war. And this is all these men had. These men had nothing but the clothes they were in and the tools they farmed with. And they were willing to die for that. They were willing to die for that way of life, to defend the noblemen they lived with, to defend the church they worshipped in against the columns of the government. And it's such a touching and important message for anybody that considers themselves a reactionary, or anybody that considers themselves a right-winger or in opposition to the state of modernity. Because these men had nothing, and they were willing to go to war to defend that. Also, this is the highest resolution image I could find, unfortunately. But,
potato quality hat here. This is.
I'm afraid this is all I could find. It's all I could find.
A peasant quality.
Yeah, exactly.
This is all they had. They only had 20p. Yeah.
One interesting thing is I went to a guild museum in Tours, and they talked about how they kept some of the artistic guild traditions alive. And you've got this, and I saw this like infomercial / documentary video about the French guilds in the 70s, and the journeyman guild workers have very similar outfits to this. Actually, the kind of big wide brimmed hat, the leather trousers, and the kind of big boots. So it's interesting how that kind of peasant styling survived literally like 150 years until America came along. Basically,
purely practical. Like your boots are needed to keep your feet dry and in comfort, and you have a hat to keep the sun off. And that's
I mean, also, look at those boots there. I mean, that's some serious damage you're going to do. You can kick someone with them.
Yeah,
this is great.
Apt.
I may have to get this look. Just imagine just rocking up.
Well, this is what I look like when I go hiking in the summer. Pretty much
with the side.
Oh yeah, it's like a massive build on the side just to threaten people.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, so Louis XVI, when he was overthrown during the Revolution, there was a battle which occurred in Paris at the Tuileries, which is a palace in Paris. I imagine that if you've been there, you may have seen it. Very famous palace. And there was something which was called the Order of St. Louis, and it was founded by Louis the Great in the 1600s. And St. Louis was Louis the Ninth, who lived in the 900s AD. And it's an order of chivalry, which is ordered for sort of actions on behalf of the state. It's still around now. it was officially banned in the 1800s, but it's still around now, and still regarded with great affection in France. And during the storming of the Tuileries, in which a mob of peasants, not peasants, sorry, but urban workers and bourgeoisie stormed the Tuileries and captured King Louis XVI. There was a battle between them, the Swiss Guard, various volunteers who had come on behalf of the king, and a small group of men known as the Gentlemen at Arms, who were a small group of royal. They were a small group of nobility, no older than about 25, who, all armed with nothing but swords, in front of the king, swore their loyalty. They said "Vive le roi" 3 times on an oath of the Bible, drew their swords, and stood in the doorways of the palace. Basically, there were only, I think, there were less than 100 of them. And when the peasants killed all the Swiss Guard, stormed into the palace, these men laid down their lives for the king, knowing that it would not achieve anything. Especially, the king wasn't fleeing or trying to get out. They weren't trying to buy time or do anything. They were just laying down their lives in defense of the principle of monarchy. And this you see here. I mean, this badge has been obviously, it's been refitted. It's been touched up. It's been quite heavily restored. But it is that patch of cloth, I believe, is from the clothing of one of these young gentlemen at arms who gave his life to defend the institution of the monarchy. He was a member of the Order of St. Louis, and that was torn from his clothing after he died. And there it is, I mean, what more can I say, We're sort of
I'm going to... it's very cool. I'm going to bore everyone with some more textile facts. This type of fabric here, can you see where you've got these kind of lots of little bumpy lines, is known as it's like an Ottoman or Ottoman style. And the way that you create it is by using alternative, very wide wefts with very thin wefts. So you can see here you've got these kind of very large, thin sausages, basically. So large sausages next to kind of thin sausages, creating this very bumpy pattern, basically. So if you've ever seen something like that, that's what it is. I mean, the actual medal itself, there's enameling, which is again a very French technique. Lots of expert enamelers, and the golden fleur de lis either side. There's this kind of classical figure, again almost Apollyon in the center again. I don't know what he's doing, holding 2 wreaths in contrapposto. The pose is a little bit weird, I've got to be honest with you, but maybe it's got significant meaning.
But yes, I just wanted to sort of bring that to the attention of the community. I think
that's great. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, they gave their life something great to themselves. Now we move on to the Jacobite Rebellion. Now to me, even though by modern standards they're the sort of, you could argue, they're the pinnacle of tradition. The Hanoverian monarchy, when it started, was deeply unpopular among the more traditionalist subjects of this kingdom. And here you have an example, quintessential examples of the Highland Jacobite army, which fought to restore the Stuarts to the throne and overthrow the Hanoverians, who had come in and usurped the throne following the Dutch usurpation of King William, who I am no fan of. I understand that there's the Jacobite cause does not in any way exist meaningfully nowadays, but nevertheless, my sympathies remain with the Jacobites and their attempt to restore the Stuarts to the throne. And again, the reason I bring this up again is because these were men of Highland clans and Highland polities which had existed for thousands of years by this point. And they fought against, again, the uniform army, the British army, the Redcoat army, which was the direct descendant of the New Model Army of Cromwell. This is kind of, in effect, it's the last battle of the English Civil War. These men, these Jacobites, and I presume that that Ferrer, you have things to say about the Highland tartan.
There's two things. Interestingly, so tartan is like a derivative of gingham. So basically, it's a combination of you have different coloured warps and that's how you get the kind of the pattern. So can you see these red stripes here? Those are red warps in the vertical, and then they're conversed with red wefts, and then you've got the kind of white warps here, and then the white wefts as well. Now, I believe tartan is always wool, and one of the interesting things about it, the colours that they get are made from winding multiple threads of wool colours together. I've seen tartan production in a few specialist places. So normally you would have imagine 4 strands of silk. They would all have the same color to give you that same color of string, if that makes sense. Now with the wool, you can have multiple flecks of color inside it, and I think they have up to 16 different strands in a single thread.
I think we need to page Saffron to get some expert opinion.
Well, I'm sure she would actually know way more about it than I would. But it's if you see today, it's really interesting seeing them manufacture it, because they basically they start off by creating the threads from different filaments. A thread is made of several filaments. So you've got these machines which will take 16 of these, or it depends on how expensive the tartan is, but yeah, between 2 or 16 filaments, bind it together into these custom threads, and then put them together in the machines. It's unbelievably intensive to create it. It creates a similar effect to tweed, but the weave is different. Tweed has like a basket weave or something like that, I believe. So, but tweed
is a bit rougher as well, I think.
Yeah, the type of thread is similar to tartan. The other thing I wanted to mention was, apparently, again, I don't know how true this is. From what I've heard is that all of this kind of clan color tartan stuff is all BS, and was made up for the Prince Regent when he came to Scotland, and
So
he got obsessed with Scotland, and then basically
they had to keep on inventing Scottish traditions.
I've got to show the picture of Prince Regent in kilt.
Yeah, he went up to Scotland on a state visit.
Look at this dweeb.
Yeah.
So cringe. Just imagine. This is the ultimate LARP, in my opinion.
It is a LARP. I mean, this is literally a German. Literally a German dressed like that. And so the whole thing around, again, I'm sure there are Scots out there that I will get angry ats from on Twitter after this stream if I get this wrong, but I believe that the whole thing around the kilt and tartan was a fairly recent invention. It was not like some ancient Scottish thing. It became popular not long before the Jacobite uprising. And as you see by that picture that I had up, there were not everybody wore a kilt. A lot of Highlanders wore trousers that were tartan. They didn't all wear kilts. And I think some clans had colors and things, but that would have been shown on the standards of the regiments. So each regiment of Highlanders had its own flag and standard with the clan insignia and colors on it, I think, rather than the colors of tartan, because of course clothing in this period was very expensive, and most Highlanders would not have had a great deal of clothing in their possession. So for everyone to own a set of tartan that was clan colored would have been unlikely, let's put it that way. So yes, I think a lot of that was kind of the later romantic myths around Scotland, and also the thing around the Prince Regent going up there to celebrate, celebrate Scottishness despite being a German LARPer. I mean, yeah, a lot of it comes from that, I think. But that's what I know from what I've read.
I mean, I think it's a pretty cool look overall. It's got that practicalness, but it's kind of interesting. It's not too over the top. You can this one's a little bit more flamboyant, the patterning and stuff. But then I quite like the kind of big. This is almost kind of into Victorian period. These big Victorian overcoats with the additional padded collar. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the face of Scotland. Right here, angry shouting face,
red hair, dishevelled.
Yeah, exactly. So we are going to get a lot of angry Scots after this.
We definitely are.
I'm teasing. I've got Scottish relatives somewhere, so I can say
There
that.
you go. I also like he's carrying a blunderbuss. I mean,
Yeah, the blunderbuss, and also the lovely sword as well. Very, very cool.
There's a word for that. They call it the great sword. It's not the claymore, is it? The sword.
No, it's not a double-handed.
I think
Anyway.
so, maybe. But yes, anyway.
Comment in chats, sword nerds.
Broadsword.
But I'm also deeply annoyed that over the centuries the left have appropriated the beret, because well, I mean, this isn't technically a beret because it's Scottish, but the beret was worn by the French peasantry to fight in the Vendée. It was worn by troops on both sides of the English Civil War. It was worn by the Jacobites. It was worn by the Spanish Carlists, the traditionalists, who we'll see later. And yet the left appropriated it as like this sort of French revolutionary cafe intellectual thing to wear a beret, and I'm so annoyed at that, because it is like the most reactionary of hats to wear the beret.
It's really hard to wear a beret and not look like a
div,
an annoying pseudo Marxist intellectual bastard. I mean, I wonder if you can get these like more Scottishy kind of ones. These look kind of cool.
Oh, a tartan one. I mean, you look like a
no. That's not tartan.
You look like a football
bonnet.
fan.
It's a
bonnet.
Yeah.
I demand that Reen wears a Scotch bonnet next event.
Absolutely.
He has to have a look. Yeah.
The Scots in this community, like all Scots, love to go on about the fact that they're Scottish, and I'll wear a kilt. I'm wearing big socks at the next event. Well, why don't they wear the bonnet then? Go the full hog. Be a Jacobite. Wear your tartan. Bring a musket or a blunderbuss and a sword and a bonnet to the next event. That's what I want to see. I want to see the Jacobites in full force to try and restore the Stuarts at the next event.
I want to see you carrying a blunderbuss on Cross City Rail.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay. I think we're gonna have to end it there, chaps. But it's been
really?
wonderful. I think we'll obviously do a part 2.
Yeah, I've got a lot more images.
Yeah, we've got tons more content, and I want to enhance. I think we may need to put in some more Second World War stuff as well in there as well. Maybe we'll see. So. I may throw in a few images of mine for next time.
Okay.
But part 1 on fashion and politics. Alexander, what's your thoughts been so far?
Yeah, I was really impressed by the range of knowledge and research that Panama's put in. So thank you very much for doing that.
No worries. As well, I will lay down my life for the Faroe Channel as the Vendéans laid down theirs.
Just from my perspective, I think it's interesting just how rapidly fashion changes. But again, it's this identifying force. It's showing your place in society, in the world, and the world of today wants to turn us into the the NPC, the person that wears everything the same, the everyman, the uniformed French revolutionary soldier. While we need to wear your Vendée garb instead. But part 2, we're going to be going into, I guess, kind of like what are some of the highlights to tease people with next time, Panama. What are we going to see?
Ooh, well, I mean, to be honest with you, this is sort of the warm up. This is like the sort of the history class, and then next week, well, it'll be the week after, won't it? But anyway, next stream we'll be going on to the 1800s, and then we'll do the mid-centuries. We'll do Gabriel of Annunzio and his incredible wardrobe. We'll do Mussolini. We'll do the black shirts in Italy and Britain. We'll do Yukio Mishima and his incredible wardrobe. We'll do René Guénon, and we'll do all kinds of the more esoteric and the more weird right-wing reactionary styles of dress. And the other thing is, I want to just make this clear: nobody in this community should be wearing jeans as an everyday wear. In fact, I think at the next event we could stage. You know how certain mid-century political parties burn books. Why don't we just everyone bring their jeans and we'll just chuck them on the pyre? We'll just burn them and shit.
I like that a lot.
I want to. I mean, we should all be dressing properly and not wearing jeans. I want.
Or what was there was a great big bonfire in like 1979 of disco records.
Was there?
Yeah. So there was some sort of
I'll look that up. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, but it's kind of controversial because it was kind of like it was interpreted in racial terms, and I'm not sure it was intended like that, or maybe it was intended like that. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, chaps. What's going on, shill-wise? Alexander, what have you been writing about this week? What 10, 15 articles have you done?
Well, thank you for asking. But if you subscribe to the next issue of the Jackdaw, the print version, you'll find my reviews of the current Dürer and Poussin exhibitions at the National Gallery, both of which are highly recommended. But you can read my detailed views in the Jackdaw. And also, there will be an interview. Well, a prudentialist, friend of many channels. He interviewed me, and so my discussion with him will be appearing on his channel. If you want to follow my writing, you can go to alexanderadamsart.wordpress.com.
Excellent. And buy your books. I haven't put the Amazon link in this week, but I'll put it in afterwards in the description.
Thank you.
So please buy Alexanderson's books or buy his books. Panama. I mean, you've been bigging up. When was the last time you did a video, Panama?
I uploaded my speech the other day. There'll be a video.
That's true. Yes,
there'll be a video coming out soon, probably Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the other thing to watch out for is the book of poetry, which is coming out on Kindle soon. It'll be out by sort of December 10th or so. Ready for Christmas, basically. It's sort of Christmassy themed poems, which are all, which I want to sort of, breathe an air of bardic spirit into this community if I can. So there you go.
Perfect. That's stocking filler.
Yeah,
as soon as it's
definitely.
live, we'll be showing it hard. If you have not yet done it, please go to Panama Hat's YouTube channel, subscribe, then watch his event video. Just because it was without a doubt one of the best speeches on the day. Alex's was great as well. You need to record yours and put it on your blog.
Panama's was fantastic because it was absolutely flawless. It was an amazing performance.
They call him the modern Cicero, don't they? And that's why you have to
among other things. Yes.
Among other things.
Sargon was in tears. He was raging. He was
raging. He was reeing,
smuckling, and just red in the face.
He couldn't handle the religious traditionalism I was spitting out.
Exactly. So please check it out. For those who haven't done already, please subscribe. Leave a comment, whether you liked it or disliked it. Give us a recommendation. We'll try and include it next time. I don't necessarily reply to all the comments, but I do read them all. So thank you very much for that. Any parting words? Anything else to say?
And your jeans.
I've in sense of solidarity, I have just taken off my jeans.
And with that image in your mind, good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Oh, he's removed himself again. Muppet. You muppet.
We're still live. All right, it's our channel now. All right.
Yes. All right.